degenerates? The NFL playoffs are here, and this is Locked In. As per usual, I'm your host, Mason Cameron, at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta, at Vishal_Gupta95 on Twitter. V, we're back. It's been a crazy playoff run so far. There's only 4 teams left. It's come down to the nitty gritty. Are you ready to do it again?
Yes, absolutely. Could not ask for better matchups this weekend. Only 3 games left on the season, but I think they're all going to be awesome. So can't wait.
Yeah, definitely going to be some good ones. And of course, we had to have you back, Mike. Joining us again is senior IN analyst Mike Manning at _Mike_Manning. Make sure you get the underscores right and go and follow him on Twitter. Mike, it's good to have you back. It's been a heck of a playoff ride. I'm happy that you've joined us the whole way. You've given us a ton of insight, won us a bunch of cash. I can't wait to do it again this week. Do you have some good stuff for us coming out this week here for the conference championships, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, obviously last week wasn't exactly the greatest matchups of the year. We saw some blowouts, which, hey, that happens in the playoffs. These are good teams, but sometimes better teams show up better. This week, though, I think we arguably have – I don't think we can really argue. These are 4 of the 5 best teams throughout the entire season as a consensus. No matter what ranking you want to put the 4 of them, that can be debatable, but these 4 have played the best this season, undoubtedly. So we have a great set of games coming up here on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a good one for sure. And, we're going to get into it right off the bat. We are going to start by breaking down the action from last week, the divisional round. And, we had some interesting games, some not so interesting games, and some games that taught us a lot of stuff. This one actually had some far-reaching repercussions into this week, which we'll get into a little bit right now. So we're starting off with Jacksonville at KC. So Jacksonville ended up losing this one, unfortunately, but they did cover the 9.5 or about 8.5 when we talked about it. So that's always a positive. The game total for this one ended up at 47. So that was the under 52, which is a little bit surprising. I definitely thought there was going to be a little bit more points on the board, but it is understandable as Mahomes did go down in the second quarter with an ankle injury, but the Chiefs didn't skip a beat. Chad Henne came in, proceeded to march 98 yards to score. Mahomes came back in the second quarter, heavily limping. They leaned on Isaiah Pacheco from that point. He ended up finishing the day 12 carries, 95 yards at 7.9 per carry. Travis Kelce, he had himself a day too. He had 17 targets, ended up with the 14 catches, 98 yards, and 2 scores. And if you were anything like me and you like to just tail random parlays you find on Twitter, there was a pretty popular one going around. I forget who put it out there, but it started with a Travis Kelce 2-touchdown day. So I started off the day very excited, except for, unfortunately, the Jags didn't end up coming out on top. So that's a shame sometimes. But Jacksonville, 2 turnovers, a late Trevor Lawrence interception, and the game really wasn't as close as the score may indicate. Mike, what did you make out of this one? Is Mahomes going to be okay, or should we be worried about what they're going to bring here this next week?
I mean, there's no doubt that there should be concern. As we saw, the line has changed in the past couple of days because we've had video come out showing Mahomes at practice as a full participant, not really limping, which there's got to be 2 things going on. One of 2 things has to be going on here. Either they misdiagnosed him or he's literally superhuman. Because the high ankle sprain causes players to miss a minimum of 2 to 3 games. Usually towards the 3 to 4 is what you're expecting a player to miss. This happened to Saquon Barkley last year, where he had the ankle roll, and it didn't. And Barkley's ankle roll didn't look anything near what Mahomes did. And I understand there's a big fluctuation as to what actually is injured for the ankles, because we saw a similar injury in the San Fran game with Dallas when Tony Pollard went down in a similar way, and his turned out to be a fractured tibia or fibula, one of the two. So he shouldn't be able to be just walking pain-free like this. I would expect, because what we saw in the game, he couldn't even do the stretch runs. He couldn't do a stretch handoff. He would do it hopping on one foot. If you see that again, one, I would stop calling stretch handoffs. And two, you're going to see a completely different game plan because one of Mahomes' biggest strengths is making plays outside the pocket, making plays later in the time for time to throw. That's one of his best abilities and what we get with these Mahomian plays, the crazy ones that you see, no looks and all those things. That's what happens is whenever he's moving around the pocket and doing his thing. So we could just see a more drop back, standard in the pocket type game from him. And that's not going to be like he can't do that. No, he's still arguably one of the best passers in the NFL, whether he's in the pocket or out of the pocket. So I'm not too concerned about his performance. I just think maybe if we're looking at numbers wise, his numbers might be a little bit lower, like in terms of pass attempts and things along those lines, and maybe try and get the ball out quicker because Cincinnati obviously has a good pass rush. They've shown it this entire playoffs. They showed it last week against Buffalo. So we might just see a quicker game than usual and more of a short, which actually this entire year Mahomes has been looking short a lot more than he has in years past anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those impromptu plays are definitely how Travis Kelce gets a lot of his work done. They connect on a ton of those plays that break down into a scramble drill where somebody has to make it happen. And Travis did a lot of that this last game. V, what stood out most to you about this matchup? Jacksonville really didn't come out to play. It didn't look like, they played well enough, but I thought that they might have, they really didn't come out heavy enough to keep up with a team like KC, and they definitely didn't take advantage of the Mahomes injury. What did you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I definitely saw that. As good as Jacksonville has been the second half of the season, they're still a few pieces away from being true contenders, and that they definitely played above their head so far, the back half of the season. They need to get a little better up front on the offensive line. They need to get, probably a better, truer number one receiver, somebody who can make Trevor Lawrence better rather than it being all on Trevor Lawrence to make his receivers better. Maybe that can be Calvin Ridley, but he's been gone for a while, so we don't know. So if there's an opportunity for them to get, a true number one, they should do that. And then, try to find some more studs on defense to help out. But, they're definitely in the right direction. But I think they definitely need a few more pieces if they want to be contenders. And then, Mike, kind of talked about it all on the Kansas City side. Obviously, the number one story this week is Mahomes, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see what he looks like. On that very first play, all eyes are going to be on him and on his leg, and seeing how he is able to move. At this point, we're just guessing. To be honest, we have some footage from practice, but you can't tell the whole story with just that. We just see him play, so it's going to be very interesting. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today is just. It's going to end up being speculation because we just don't know what his true status is. So it's going to be interesting to find out.
Well, and his health has fluctuated the line quite a bit, as we've talked about, and we'll talk about even a bit more when we come up to that game. And, the interesting thing to me, besides the miraculous recovery that he made from halftime, he's still limping around a bit, but to be able to run out there as he did after, by most accounts, I'm pretty sure Chris was talking about it on the broadcast, that, these things proceed to get worse throughout the night, and he only ended up looking better. I think that they have a lot going for them still. It's going to be a really interesting game move forward. I'm disappointed that Jacksonville didn't come out a lot hotter. And like you said, they do need a true number one threat. As good as Christian Kirk has been a valuable asset in that offense, they really do need somebody that is a separator and that can really make plays happen. That would be a life changer for that offense. Absolutely. Can't wait to see that happen too. It's going to be a good year for Jacksonville. Those guys over in Duval, they got something going. They got something brewing. That's for sure. Somebody who has more questions than I think any of us have answers are probably going to be the New York Football Giants, who fell on the road to Philly 7-38. Philly covered the 8. They tripled the 8. They led 28-0 in the first half. They had 268 yards on the ground. They commanded pretty much anything they wanted. Jalen Hurts, he looked as well as he has pretty much at any point in the season with 3 total touchdowns. V, what were you? I know we weren't really all that surprised, but I think I expected a little bit of a closer game. What did you see in this one?
I just saw a much better team out there on the field as compared to the Giants. They just didn't stand a chance in this one. It was over right from the beginning. As fun as the Giants have been throughout the season, they're not a team that can handle being down multiple scores like that. They don't have the offensive capability to come back like that. So it was over right from the start as soon as they, just weren't able to slow down anything from what the Eagles are doing. I think the interesting thing was, even though they got some talent on that defensive line for New York, Philly just ran the ball all over them. So many yards per carry, and Hurts was not touched. So I think the thing to take away from this one is how good Philly's offensive line is, and that's going to be an absolute key going forward through the rest of these playoffs. Their offensive line might be the best unit remaining amongst all 4 teams across all units. That's how good their offensive line is, and that's really what stood out in this game. The running backs weren't touched. Jalen Hurts wasn't touched. It was just super easy, even though we were talking about Dexter Lawrence for so long the past few months, how good he is. He wasn't able to make a dent against this offensive line.
Kenny Gainwell had a humongous day.
Austin Scott with another rushing touchdown against the Giants.
Scott with another rushing touchdown. They really did just make it look easy. The lanes were huge for them to run through. And unfortunately, the Giants actually ran the ball half decently themselves, but when you get behind as much as they did, your hands are tied and you can't continue to feed the ball on the ground. And Saquon Barkley kind of became an afterthought in that game, which is a tough draw because he is undoubtedly their best player. I think an interesting thing moving forward is, where do the Giants go from here? What is Dan Jones' next step? Mike, what did you make out of this matchup? And do you see a path forward for this Giants team?
Yeah, I definitely expected. I mean, they needed to have Barkley produce early on, and then I expected better handling of the run game in terms of defense for the Giants, because the linebackers for the Giants just had no idea how to handle the read offense, which I don't know why, because talent-wise, I think Jalen Smith and Jarrad Davis they're athletic, but they just had no idea what gap to jump to and everything else. They'd guess one, be wrong. They'd guess the other one that next time and then be wrong again. And it just led for Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell, so on and so forth, to just run on completely. I know that the Eagles have arguably the best offensive line in the entire NFL, not even just the 4 left. But we've seen Dexter Lawrence, we've seen Leonard Williams, as recently as just a couple weeks ago, play strong at least part of the game that they had played in like week 18 or whatever it was. They played strong throughout this entire season, and they've held up well. We saw Dexter Lawrence just manhandle the entire Vikings offensive line. I understand there's a huge talent difference between the Vikings offensive line and the Eagles, but Dexter Lawrence has been just a stud the entire year. And since the defensive line was not able to hold up, the linebackers weren't able to make any plays, and it looked bad quick. And as you said, once you go down so much, you can't even run the ball. You can't even give Barkley the ball as often. You just got to try and get the screen game or get the ball in his hands that way. Didn't work at all. Was a sad game to watch.
Yeah.
Looking forward, I mean, they got to address the reports are Barkley wants a Christian McCaffrey-esque type contract, so that's around $16 million per year. We've seen running backs not do well with that, but I'm sure that San Fran would say, we're pretty happy to pay Christian McCaffrey that $16 million right now because he's playing phenomenally. But you never know when it comes to the running back position, so that's tough to say. Daniel Jones is going to be the next one. I feel like they're going to lean towards getting him re-signed. Whether it be even a franchise tag would probably be scary. I think they'd do that just as a placeholder at best and really try to hammer home a deal. But it's going to be more towards a short-term deal, trying to get him to show like, hey, you didn't really have that phenomenal of a year, but you did play well in the offense. So let's see what else, if you can repeat it or something along those lines, and we'll try and get more help around you at the wide receiver position. That's the best they can do because there's nothing else stronger on this free agent market that they should do. And even trading wise, it's just not really their style.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing, huge thing has got to be getting out from underneath a huge $72 million contract in Kenny Galladay, which has definitely eaten a hole into their offense. When you have a guy like Isaiah Hodgins, who is producing significantly more than a guy who's making significantly more money than him, it really puts things into perspective, and they need to reel it in there because they have had a lot of failed experiments in that wide receiver room lately. For it to get as bad as it is right now, that has to be one of their first stops. Absolutely. So it'll be an interesting thing to see moving forward. And the Eagles, you know, they're a pretty good team. We're going to talk about them a little bit more here soon. So on to the next game, another shocking one. We have the Cincinnati Bengals winning against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo, 27-10. Cincinnati easily wins the money line. They obviously cover the +5.5. The total for this game, 37 points, under the 48.5. Cincinnati led 14-0 in the first quarter, came off right off the boot, and, you know, had their way with Buffalo, for a better say, you know, for lack of a better term. Joe Burrow made it look easy in the snow. Joe Mixon had himself a day, 20 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown. Buffalo, tons of self-inflicted wounds, 8 penalties, 60 yards. I was personally shocked that Buffalo did not show up to play. People are calling this the Buffalo curse. Mike, what did you see when you saw Joe Burrow and Josh Allen tee off in this one?
I mean, I think the biggest thing was the complete and utter lack of pass rush by Buffalo. We had said before the week, we were like, hey, this Buffalo pass rush is not really there. It's just a bunch of bodies that are trying, you know, to make the most out of it, because they lost Von Miller, who was their by far best pass rusher over on Thanksgiving, and it has not been the same since. So that lack of pass rush, combined with Tre'Davious White seeming like he's not really 100% back from his injury, and the inexperience elsewhere in the secondary in terms of the cornerbacks, just the Bengals wide receivers were able to eat him up. And Jamar Chase had himself a day. And I think there was video showing him saying, this will be my first snow game. I don't like it, but, you know, he must have liked it enough because he had himself a game. And on the other side, I don't know. I honestly don't know why the Buffalo offense looked as bad as it did, because they shouldn't. They're not really made for a snow game, which is odd because you would think that a team that plays in Buffalo would be more accustomed to that, but they're not really a ground and pound type team. They could not protect Josh Allen almost at all. And there was a few drops by Gabe Davis that could have probably gone for a touchdown. And Stephon Diggs, as we saw, was not exactly happy that he was burning Eli Apple, but Josh Allen was unable to see him, or I don't know. So they were just not on the same connection there. It was a tough one for Buffalo, that's for sure.
And I could feel Diggs's pain because you could continue to see him beat Eli Apple like a drum and just not get very many looks. And that's tough when you're as talented as a guy as Stephon Diggs. I know that we talked a lot about this one. In the Discord, we were talking about this one a bunch. I even quietly joked that I put my mortgage on Cincinnati +5.5 and quietly took that one to the bank. What did you make out of this one? I know that this was one of our favorite picks of last week for sure.
Yeah, from a betting standpoint, it was a ton of fun because it was one of the easiest covers you're going to have ever. I mean, it was just right from the start. At no point were they not covering or they even close to not covering. So that was fun. But just from a NFL fan standpoint, this was a huge bummer, to be honest. Not even necessarily just if you were rooting for Buffalo, just as a neutral party rooting for a good game between two young quarterbacks. This was not the game anybody wanted to see, specifically from the Buffalo side. And like Mike said, I don't know what happened with Buffalo's offense. It's very strange. It's not like they have any injuries or they can fall back on and make excuses for that. Maybe you can talk about Josh Allen's elbow. I'll be curious to see how much that was actually impacting him, for most of the season, and we'll see. Maybe he just comes out on a tear next season when he's fully healthy, and maybe that was actually a big issue this season. But beyond that, it's hard to figure out exactly what went wrong with this offense and this team in general, and what moves can they make in the offseason to fix it, because we all came into the season saying this is a near perfect roster. They have all of the players and talent necessary to win a championship, and they get bounced at home in the second round in pretty much a blowout fashion. That something's not right there, whether it's the coaching or something wrong with the players. So something's off with Buffalo. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do over the summer and in the offseason, and see what they do next season.
It will be an interesting way forward for them because they do just have way too much talent. To have another exit like this in the playoffs is insane. Yeah. I know that I didn't see it happening. It really wasn't as interesting of a game, but I was laughing the whole time because obviously covered a nice little 5.5, which, by the way, how? Like,
I think it went to 6 too, like before games.
I think weird. It did.
Like,
so
where is that money coming from?
That's a good question, V. The Illuminati picked wrong this week. And another game. This was at least a half interesting game, even though we wanted a bunch of points. And that just didn't happen. Which I, again, don't know how that ends up being the case, considering how good these two offenses had been. But wow, it was pretty bad. At least definitely from the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, who had, I want to say, his lowest graded passing game of his career, or one of. It was graded in the 30s, I believe, from our friends over at Pro Football Focus. That is one of the worst performances that I've seen in recent memory with him. So Dallas 12, San Francisco 19. San Fran covers the 3.5, 4. I think it was at 4 when we were talking about it on the show. Total here, 31 for an under 46.5. So for anybody keeping track at home, we had pretty much all overs in the wild card round. And in this round, we had all 4 unders. So if you had that on your bingo card, you are still winning money. And this was another interesting one too. I don't know what to make of it. Brock Purdy, again, doesn't really perform out of the gate that well. The team around him, extremely strong, shows out. The defense played extremely well, made Dak Prescott look very mediocre, and they end up taking this one late. Mike, does Purdy have it in him to keep this role going, or should we kind of temper our expectations?
Is it possible? Yes. Do I expect it? No. He's not playing that great. He's one of the finalists for the Rookie of the Year, which is ridiculous to me. And he's playing essentially the same metrics. All his stats are basically coming out within a few points or something along those lines in terms of like percentage yards coming after the catch, yards per things like that are all basically in line with Jimmy Garoppolo. There's like 2 or 3 areas where he's improved on. One, he's not throwing as many picks. Jimmy does that. It's good for, like, that's what you want a rookie to do, is just not screw up. Don't throw those interceptions. And he's not getting sacked as much. Jimmy Garoppolo was somebody that would either throw the ball away real quick if he was under pressure, or he would take a sack pretty quickly. That was not his strength, certainly. So Purdy's mobility is there. That's great. But he's not throwing the ball with pinpoint accuracy by any means. Like that throw to Kittle that was late in the game, a huge conversion for them in the middle of the field for, I think it was a 14-yard or 15-yard gain. That was all Kittle. That wasn't Purdy by any means. I'm surprised that Kittle was even able to do what he did with it by getting a hand on the ball while he had beaten his man by a couple yards. So I don't think that Purdy's playing that great. He obviously didn't, the offense didn't move as well against the best defense that San Fran has played arguably all year. So Dallas's defense is good. Philly's defense is much better, in my opinion. I just don't see them riding Purdy to the Super Bowl because I expect that this defense coming up being on the road, they've only had like 3 road games since October in like, I don't know, 8 weeks or whatever it might have been, 9 weeks. So they have not played on the road much at all. Purdy has only been in Seattle once, so he's only had 1 road game, I believe. This is a whole different game. You played against Dallas, and with all the, as you said, with Dak and how he played, if he plays even remotely a little bit better,
They have a chance.
San Fran probably loses this game.
Yeah.
If they didn't play so utterly horribly at the end of that game, where I had no idea what they were doing, Dak almost got a safety by just running into Eric Armstead in the end zone on a scramble. Luckily, he bounced off and then threw an incompletion, but still. And then we know the final play.
How about that last play? I'm so happy you brought that up.
That's going to infamously be shown as one of those what ifs.
Oh.
You know? But no. So if you're saying that they needed their defense to make enough plays or make Dallas screw up enough and make enough mistakes to be able to keep the offense in the game, well, what does Philly do well? Take care of the ball. Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott are 2 different kind of quarterbacks this season. Very different. So I just see that if you're expecting Purdy to even not make a mistake by the time, like going into this game, it's a tough ask with that pass rush in Philly, as well as a team that's very good at turning the ball over themselves. I see the line ending here with Purdy. There's a reason a rookie hasn't made the Super Bowl in NFL history.
And this would be an even more insane one because he's not just a rookie, but he's the very last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. And you actually put it perfect. And we've actually been talking about this a little bit in our Discord, is that Brock Purdy's numbers are right there around league average. His biggest selling point is he's not making these mistakes, which is something is very, common with young quarterbacks. So when those mistakes do end up coming, it ends up making a half decent game and it's going to look very bad and it could get ugly very quickly. Philly is the team that can do that. And we will actually get into that one right here because that is the first game of conference championship weekend that we are breaking down. It is going to be the 49ers at the Eagles. And we have Philly favored -2.5 at home. The total for this game, 46. A couple of key factoids for you. Philly has dropped 4 of their last 5 against the spread. They did cover last week, obviously. They made up even more ground for it by covering that spread 3-fold. They are also 6-2 against the spread at home with Hurts under center. And even more impressively, they are 5-0 against the spread when favored by 7 or fewer points. On the flip side, you have San Francisco, who is 7-1 against the spread with Purdy under center. And this is actually the first time San Francisco has gotten points on the spread since prior to their Week 9 bye. That's a lot of games. But oddly enough, San Francisco is only 4-4 against the spread on the road. And as Mike said, we are actually 1-1 with Purdy starting under center for the San Francisco 49ers on the road. San Fran, in my opinion, is propped up by a weak schedule. Since Thanksgiving, they have had just 2 road games and 1 opponent with a winning record. Now, I know that they played some teams that made the playoffs and whatnot, but not every team was above 500 when the San Francisco 49ers came to town and they just happened to take advantage of it. Now they're going to run into Philly, who is healthy and playing about as good a football as they've played all year. Lane Johnson, he is doing amazingly. This defense is rushing the passer great. Jalen Hurts, he looks back to full health after missing a handful of games to close out the season. And they have a dynamic duo at wide receiver that has totaled 19 touchdowns this season. That is most by any wide receiving duo in the league. And it's second only behind McKinnon and Kelsey as any other duo. So I'm very impressed by this Eagles team. I know we've talked about them a lot this year in this playoff run, but I definitely think they are hitting their stride at the right time. And they have debatably one of the best 53-man rosters in the league. V, when you see this game, what are you making of it? Do you think that the San Francisco 49ers have it in them to keep this one close late in the game? I think that that's going to be a huge factor in this one. What do you see with this?
This is going to be one of the most exciting games to watch if you're a defensive or offensive line fan. This is just unbelievable. Both sides of the ball, whether it's Philly's O-line versus San Francisco's D-line or San Fran's offensive line versus Philly's D-line, it's going to be a bloodbath either way, and it's going to be incredible to watch. By the end of the day, though, Philly is just a better team. They have the better quarterback. I just don't see how Purdy's going to be able to go into Philly and keep this one close and pull out a win. I think it's going to be too much on him. I don't think McCaffrey is going to have the room to operate that he normally does. And if he's not going to get going, then there's going to be too much reliance on Brock Purdy on 3rd and longs and where they're down possibly late in the game and they have to throw the ball. I think it's just going to be too much for him to do, too much work for him to do in this game. I don't think it's going to work out for them. I think this should be another Philly win. Take the cover for 2.5. I also like the under in this game. I'm not seeing a ton of points on either side because both defenses are pretty solid. We talked about Philly a lot. They've just looked very good. And Jalen Hurts didn't even have to do that much last week. It was kind of like another bye week for him, to be honest. He didn't have to do too much. He kind of rested his shoulder a little bit more. Now he probably has to do a little bit more this weekend, but I think he's ready to go. I think he can do it. He has the talent. He has the offensive line up front to keep him clean. I like Philly in this one for sure.
And Jalen Hurts' dynamic ability with his legs is definitely what's made him extremely dangerous. I know that on his rushing touchdown, I'm not even sure they drew it up that way. He really just bobbled off the snap, I think panicked for a second, and then just took off just faster than everybody, stronger than everybody, and wasn't afraid. And he just made his way into the end zone. So it's fun to watch guys like that play where even when things go wrong, they can make it go right. I can't wait to see this one really tee off. We've kind of been keying this one up for a long time because the NFC has not had a ton of talented teams coming through it this year. These two teams have definitely been the cream of the crop, and luckily we get to see them tee off. Mike, what do you make of this matchup coming up?
Yeah, these are two teams that we have said it's a very top-heavy NFC. These were the two teams that people had called the two best teams for over half the season probably at this point, and that's why this was the matchup we expected. And with it's two teams that play very similar to each other. They both want to run the ball a lot. They both count on their offensive lines and their playmakers to do a lot for them on offense. Between the two wide receivers on each team, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk versus A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They both have a stud tight end, Dallas Goedert versus George Kittle. And Philly may use they use their quarterback certainly a lot more in the running game. And their running back is more of a committee style rather than relying on one player compared to Christian McCaffrey. I'd say on Philly's defense, the biggest thing is going to be McCaffrey, I think. They can shut down the wide receivers, in my opinion, with Darius Slay and James Bradbury both playing at nearly all pro levels this year. It'll be interesting to whether they focus more on Kittle and trying to take him out of the passing game, or if they try and see about calming down Christian McCaffrey in terms of using a safety, using a linebacker, I believe Avonte Maddox, their slot cornerback, might be coming back, so that could be another option that they use. But this offensive line for San Fran has the best left tackle in football in Trent Williams. I don't think there's even discussion there. The problem is their interior are all 3 first-year starters. There's a rookie at one guard position. There's a second year at the guard, and it's his first time starting this year. And then their center is starting for the first time in this season for a full season. The problem with that is Philly has the deepest front seven, especially along the defensive line, in the NFL. They've got like 4 or 5 guys that have 40-plus pressures. At least 3 of them have like double-digit sacks. I mean, they have Jordan Davis, their first-round pick, came back now in the interior. They also had Javon Hargrave. They got Fletcher Cox. They added Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh when Jordan Davis went down. That improved their interior even more than it was. That's not even talking about Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, and Brandon Graham on the outside. So Trent Williams is going to be able to hold his own and completely lock down one of the edge defenders for Philly. I think that this interior is going to be right in Brock Purdy's face. Javon Hargrave, somebody like one of those guys that they cycle through, is going to be right up in Purdy's face a lot and look to shut down any interior runs from Mitchell or McCaffrey.
Yeah, and that's definitely where the crux for me in this matchup is. It's interesting to see because, like you guys both said, these teams are built very similarly in the sense that they're strong on both offensive and defensive lines. One of the things that is going to be an asset to the Niners is going to be their ability to run that zone scheme and run play action off of things like that. Because when we were looking into it, when I was doing a little bit of research, it looks like the Eagles actually struggle a little bit against those zone runs, inside zone particularly, where they are under 50 PFF run defense grade. So that is going to be a place to strike and to help possibly keep that pass rush from pinning their ears back on Purdy. That's a big ask, though. They're going to have to make something happen because these guys are no slouches in the center there, and we're going to have to see them, get some push. It's going to be an interesting battle, and like you said, V, it is going to be an absolute bloodbath. I can't wait to see it go down. Another thing that I'm really highlighting here, I think, is going to be a specific matchup. Mike, I know that you're going to like this one, being the wide receiver cornerback matchup guy that you are. I'm actually highlighting a big game from A.J. Brown because when we look at it, this Niners team, they run a ton of cover 3. They don't switch sides a lot. And A.J. Brown happens to line up on the left side. Well, who lines up at the right cornerback for the San Francisco 49ers is who we actually talked about last week, Deommodore Lenoir, and he has struggled. This past week, the Dallas Cowboys made it a point to put CeeDee Lamb on his side in cover 3 situations. And Lenoir looked absolutely lost, like he needed a map on each of those catches. That is where CeeDee Lamb did a bunch of his damage. And we could even go as to argue that Dak had a bad day, but what is Mike McCarthy doing, not absolutely taking more advantage of that matchup? That could have been the difference maker for that game because, like we said, it was just a handful of plays that could have made the difference for Dallas and Philly. The 49ers may not be here if that were the case. So that's going to be a matchup that I'm highlighting. It'll be an interesting one moving forward because, man, it is fun to watch that dynamic duo over there in Philly because they just put numbers on the board, and I love to see it. Anything else we are seeing from this matchup, boys? I know it's going to be a good one, and I want to milk it for all it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, with the wide receiver ones have just dominated this San Fran secondary every week of the playoffs. We saw DK Metcalf do it in the wild card round. We saw CeeDee Lamb do it last week. And the big thing here is this offense has multiple options to be able to go to. So no matter, even if you do go to a form where you try and take away the number 1 receiver, which San Fran has not done yet, they have not changed their game plan by any means. It just means that either Devontae or A.J. Brown is going to have their role and perform at it. A.J. Brown has been their deep threat that has been able to make the big plays. gets the yards after the contact, people miss after the catch, and Devontae Smith has been more of the short screen guy this year compared to last year where was the deep threat himself. And he's been able to make yardage from basically nothing. Those wide screens where you're not supposed to gain that much, he gets the blocking out in front and is able to run behind his blockers as well as he does run his routes. So either option is going to be great, because I'm going to be curious if Fred Warner is even put out on one of the wide receivers, honestly, because he was able to run with CeeDee Lamb down the seam. They're going to have to take care of Dallas Goedert, obviously. So he's going to have his hands full with Dallas Goedert possibly, or they might be like, hey, we need some help with these wide receivers, because that is the bread and butter of this offense, is the talent at the receiving options.
Well, and you can tell that this Niners defense has tried to do some things to help cover that up. When they actually try to cover up Lenore and hide him from some of these wide receiver ones, when offenses get wind and start putting DK Metcalf over there and CeeDee Lamb over there, they've tried to go into cover one a couple of times, but Ward, as good of a corner as he is in cover three, that's just not really how football works. They're different schemes. They're harder to do. They're harder to transition between. And Ward has actually been one of the worst corners in the league in cover one situations. He actually allowed an incredibly, disgustingly long, nasty 9 route to DK Metcalf in that round. And that's going to definitely be a weak point for them. So as you said, I think taking advantage of both of these wide receivers is a good strategy for sure. V, is there anything else you're highlighting in this matchup? I know that there's a ton of talent throughout both of these rosters. Is anybody popping out to you as maybe somebody that you're identifying in props this week?
Probably going to go back to the Devontae Smith well. It didn't work out quite well last week. He missed it by 3.5 yards on the over last week, but I think he could have a big game again this week. I think Hurts is going to have a monster game as well. I expect to see a lot of good stuff from Jalen Hurts. So, yeah, it seems like it's all Philly for me in this one.
Yeah, and they score a ton of touchdowns over there. Both of these teams score a ton of points. So this is going to be a doozy. And even though the total is as low as 46.5, it's going to be a bloodbath, a heavyweight brawl, if you will. Yeah. And so on to the other side of the bracket, we have the AFC Championship matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. I hope you got your refunds for the neutral site game in Atlanta, courtesy of Joe Burrow. Hey, is there anything that Joe Burrow cannot do? I just love to watch that guy play. I love to watch his attitude. And I love to see this line move to giving him points, and I will continue to eat it up. So we are looking at this line has fluctuated a ton. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Right now, currently, as it sits, prior to us going on air and me doing the research for this, KC has moved back to being favored at -1. We talk about this all the time. When it falls below that key number of 3.5, it's time to start talking money line. And I am more than comfortable getting behind the Bengals on the money line here as well. This is one of my favorite bets of the week. A lot of it comes down to what we talked about, the health of Patrick Mahomes. His ankle, he did have that injury last round, but as we all talked about before, he has been seen practicing. The tape was from him practicing. Now, how much information that gives us, remains to be seen how he's going to play on Sunday. But here are a few tidbits, all things equal. Cincinnati has the second best against the spread record in the NFL at 13-5. They are an impressive 3-0 as dogs. Kansas City, on the other hand, tied for the third worst against the spread record in the league, 6-11-1. They are just 2-7 against the spread over their last 9. These teams matched up back in week 13 at the start of December in Cincinnati. KC was 2.5-point favorites on the road. Cincinnati won by a clean 3. And I know that we were definitely big on that one at the time too, V. what do we make of this matchup and all of the line movement going on here? Is this thing ever going to stop moving until we get up to game time, or is the money going to keep throwing this thing around?
It's just going to keep going until we possibly get any clarification on Mahomes' injury. Again, at this point, it's very much speculation, and people, I think, are just guessing, to be honest. I mean, they might feel like they have some sort of knowledge or information, but truly, I don't think that's going to be the case until we see that first snap. So right now, people are just guessing on his injury. I think they saw the video from practice, and they said to themselves, "Oh, he looks good. He's not limping. He must be ready to go and fully healthy." Obviously, the Chiefs are going to win then. But I'm with you. Even if Mahomes was fully healthy, I still likely would have taken Cincinnati just because Joe Burrow is that dude. I mean, this guy is just unbreakable, unbeatable. He's so much fun to watch. He's a fantastic quarterback, and he has crazy good weapons. I feel like as good as Jamar Chase is, we really haven't talked about him that much this season as compared to his rookie season, but he's still playing just as well. We saw it again last week. This dude is an absolute monster. I don't see anybody on Kansas City being able to slow him down. He's going to have a big game. Everybody on that offense is going to have a big game. The key matchup is still Cincinnati's offensive line against Kansas City's D line with guys like Chris Jones and Frank Clark. Cincinnati's offensive line was very impressive last week. The entire game plan was good to kind of hide them and hide their weaknesses. I expect more of the same this week. And if, Burrow's getting it out quick, whether he's just dumping it off or getting it to Jamar Chase very quickly, it should work for them. So with the status of Mahomes unclear, I don't know how you bet against Joe Burrow in this game, especially when you're getting points at this point.
Yeah, that tandem of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, they're hard to contain. Jamar Chase has been on probably one of the best tears I think we've seen from a wide receiver in a number of years, scored in a ton of games. He is absolutely eating. One of the big matchups for this one, though, as you just highlighted, is going to be the patchwork Bengals offensive line against an absolute stud over there in Kansas City and Chris Jones. Mike, what are you taking out of some key matchups here in this one? Do you think that Chris Jones is going to be able to do what the Buffalo defensive line was not able to do?
I think Chris Jones doesn't have a career playoff sack, which is crazy to think with how often they've been in the playoffs. I don't know if this is going to be the weekend that he gets his first career playoff sack, but the big thing is he's the one that gets the double teams. So if Cincinnati's offense is paying too much attention to him, this entire KC defense as a whole has the second most sacks on the season, behind only Philly. So this entire pass rush as a unit still succeeds, and they still get pressure. They also like to blitz their defensive backs a lot. They bring L'Jarius Sneed as a cornerback inside and like to use him along the line of scrimmage to blitz. So it's going to be a lot different than last week. Buffalo's pass rush is not anywhere near the level that KC's is. So I understand that the patchwork offensive line played well last week, but it's similar to what we said with San Fran looking at Philly compared to the past matchups they've had in terms of offensive weapons. This is very different than pass rushes they've seen in the past couple weeks since being in the playoffs. Baltimore's pass rush did pretty well against them, and they don't even have a very strong pass rush. Now, looking at Buffalo, they didn't do anything. KC has shown they had Trevor Lawrence under pressure a ton. And again, Chris Jones didn't do anything specifically himself, but he got the attention on the inside. If you have inexperienced play from your Cincinnati Bengals interior offensive linemen, just like San Fran's, we have Alex Kappa as I don't know. Do we have Alex Kappa coming back? Do we have Jonah Williams coming back? Are these players returning or not? Because I know Jonah Williams sounded like a couple-week injury, that's for sure.
Yeah.
A dislocated kneecap, I believe it was. That sounds pretty bad.
Sounds about if you're taking anything less than a month for dislocated kneecap, let somebody test you for superhuman blood, because that's insane. Absolutely.
So I do think that this KC pass rush is going to be able to take advantage of this Cincinnati offensive line. Burrow has responded to that in years past, obviously, throughout his career. As we saw last year, still got sacked 9 times, was still able to make plays on offense. I think the bigger question is going to be for this KC offense against the Bengals defense is, can they do anything for Travis Kelce? Because they have not in their matchups. Kelce has gone off. He's having, I believe, arguably his best year of his entire career at year like 13, 14, whatever this is for him. And Cincinnati has struggled in general against the tight end throughout the years. Kelce spends most of his time in the slot, and he's 6'5" or something along those lines, 6'3". And Cincinnati's usual slot cornerback is Mike Hilton, who's like 5'8", 5'9". Don't know if they'll continue to use him there if Kelce moves inside. They might, use Von Bell or one of their linebackers. Jermaine Pratt has been playing great this year, having a career year himself. So it's going to be interesting what they do for Kelce, because since KC's not going to care what the wide receivers do as long as they just go downfield and take some attention away from Kelce, if Kelce can continue to make plays like he always does. So he could carry this offense real easily, especially if they're going to look for a quicker game with Mahomes injured.
And you hit the nail on the head. I think one of those key matchups for sure has to be Jermaine Pratt against Travis Kelce. Jermaine Pratt is actually the top rated coverage linebacker in the NFL this year per PFF. And that will be a huge matchup, especially if, like we're talking about. So one thing that I love to think about is that I like to think that Andy Reid might be able to sprinkle a little Belichick into his gamesmanship here and submit, old tape of, or, give somebody some old tape, leak some old tape of Mahomes practicing, whereas maybe really behind closed doors, Mahomes is, on crutches or something, and nobody's seen Mahomes for a couple days because he's, hiding being extremely injured. Now, that's just my conspiracy theory side speaking, but I think that all things considered, like you guys did say, some of these injuries are much tougher than they're, being led on to be. To have a high ankle sprain like this and not be out for at least a month is going to be an interesting thing to see going forward, because how is he going to be able to pivot, move, transition, wait, get on the run? What makes Patrick Mahomes so lethal has been his ability to make impromptu plays. He's hit Kelce on a bunch of those, like we talked about. So if he's not able to do that, that's a huge piece of the offense taken away. I think one thing to highlight here is going to definitely be the running backs out of the backfield. So you're going to get Jerick McKinnon on a lot of these designed passes to get him into mismatches that are really going to probably be the bread and butter of this offense if Mahomes' ankle is at all not 100%. I also see them doing a ton of feeding of Isaiah Pacheco, who was very much featured when Mahomes was hurt. He was featured with Chad Henne under center, and even when Mahomes came back into the game, as Mahomes is trying to limp over to give him the ball, he still played a great game, and they're going to need to lean on him in order to keep this ball away from the Bengals and away from a guy like Joe Burrow, who can absolutely make them pay. And it's going to be an interesting start to see. V, I know we talk about it a lot. Are there some touchdowns that you're maybe targeting in this one? We have a ton of points, 47.5. I think, 74% of the experts and users over here on Betting Pros are taking the over. Who are you identifying to maybe find their way to the end zone?
Definitely going to look at Jamar Chase, like I already mentioned. He feels like a lock to get in there. Dude's been awesome recently. You can look at somebody like Hayden Hurst to get into the end zone. You obviously like Travis Kelce again. He's just been a monster. He had 2 last week. A lot of guys, McKinnon on a catch. He was hot for a while. He's kind of cooled off lately in the touchdown department. But like you said, they might scheme up some stuff for him. So look for Pacheco to get in there, or McKinnon to get in there. That's kind of what I'm looking at. It's tough to say. You want to, like you said, Mahomes is not as mobile as he usually is. So you would like to see Mahomes try to rush one in, but it's hard to pick that with the bum ankle right now.
Yeah, that would make that a much easier ask for sure. But we can't have easy things in life, V. We can't have that. So that breaks down the AFC for us and the last of the two matchups. And we head into the big question, gents. So we have the odds here for Super Bowl favorites left. We're starting off with the best odds: Philly plus 250, Cincinnati plus 280, Kansas City plus 300, and San Francisco plus 350. Now, obviously, with the news of Mahomes moving the line for the game quite a bit, you can also expect the Super Bowl futures lines to have probably jostled a little bit since I wrote these down. So you're probably going to find maybe Kansas City above them, maybe not. Who knows? But this is why we shop around, and it's always best to shop to get the best prices. Gents, who do we have taking this one? Mike, there's a lot of good teams on the board. We have definitely highlighted Cincinnati and Philly all the way up to this point, and here they are. We find themselves as the best two odds. Are we still riding with Cincy and Philly in this one?
I mean, as we sat there the entire time here, and we said everything, all the stats that were lined up, all the odds and everything else, we said we expect Philly to win. We expect Cincy to win. It's been what we've said every single week as this show has gone. We said that Philly was the best team. Their odds were great throughout the postseason, and Cincinnati's as well was just criminally low for them. So I do believe that those two are going to be the ones that make it to the Super Bowl. But if you were to pick any other team, I feel like it has to be Kansas City because of the fact that if they do pull through and beat Cincinnati, they have 2 more weeks to let Mahomes get healthy, let him heal his ankle as best as possible, and let Andy Reid scheme up as much as possible that he always does with that week off that he's just notorious for coming back from with amazing game plans.
I like to think that Andy Reid just, he does what I do after a long day of work, and he rolls up and he smokes a joint, and then he just lets the creative juices flow. And that's what I see him doing too. That's a great point. Kansas City is still an extremely strong team, and at plus 300, they might even be the value at this point, which isn't an issue because if you've been riding with us the whole time, you already have Cincy and Philly tickets at much, much better odds than 250 and 280. V, remind me, what were we shopping Cincy prior to the playoffs? Like 800, no?
Yeah, like plus 800, and I think it's like plus 550 for Philly. So
yeah,
pretty good.
So you're already well endowed there. I wouldn't worry about it too much. V, who are you highlighting to come out of here? Obviously, we still like Cincy. Are you at all anywhere further down the board? Maybe San Francisco? Do they have a chance of squeaking this one out and being the first rookie quarterback to make the Super Bowl?
I think their only real shot is if they do go up against Kansas City in the Super Bowl, a rematch from a couple of years ago. Then you could let that defensive line loose against Mahomes, who even with a couple more weeks might not be fully healthy. Still, doesn't have the greatest offensive line in front of him. If you let Nick Bosa loose against the Kansas City offensive line, I think that could be a good opportunity for them to win. But if they have to go up against Cincinnati, then it's going to be a little bit tougher of a task, even though they also have issues on the offensive line. You just can't bet against Joe Burrow in that spot. So I don't know if they were able to get past Philly somehow and face Kansas City, I might give them a shot. But other than that, it's tough to pick them. And I think we got to stick with Philly and Cincy. They got us here so far. Got to stick with them.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm right there with you. I think that it's a shoe-in to be Philly, Cincy, and it's going to be a really, really good game, one that we definitely deserve to see. And as it's always gone, I think, Mike, you said it before, both one seeds don't make it. That's not how this thing works. So
historically, that just doesn't happen.
We are destined for a Cincy Philly or a KC San Francisco. I guess we'll have to see. But either way, it's going to be a pretty dang good matchup.
Which sucks because, could you imagine a Kelsey Bowl? Jason Kelsey, Travis Kelsey.
That would be
What is it,
so
the Kelsey
good.
Bowl or the Andy Reid Bowl with Andy Reid going up
I mean,
against Philly?
there's so many storylines
The
there.
storylines. You know what?
If it's a
Actually,
Philly
never mind. Wait, we need to go back because I'm going to put my tinfoil hat back on here. These networks would absolutely kill for Philly KC to be in the Super Bowl. And I think that, hey, they're going to
You
make
can
it
just
happen.
picture all the graphics they would come up with.
Oh my gosh, the graphics would be insane.
Over-unders of how many times they show the Kelsey parents during the game.
Oh, exactly. That would be the perfect. That's going to be the perfect prop. Put a pin in that one. And if we get that game, that is going to be the first prop I look up come the Super Bowl show. And for anybody who doesn't know, we are blowing the Super Bowl show out. I am borrowing, and stealing every single personality that IN has to offer. And I'm bringing them onto the show. And we are going to talk all things Super Bowl, all things Super Bowl bets, and everything else good about the final game of the season. Can't wait to do it. So stay tuned for that. But finally, I was mulling over doing a show for just the odds on the awards. But oddly enough, it's a little harder to find the awards odds. So here, thank you to our friends over at Vegas Insider. I am going to use the odds that they have compiled as of, it says, yesterday morning. Now, I don't know exactly where they acquired these odds, but that doesn't matter because you guys are all good bettors at home. And if you listen to us at all, you always shop around for the best price. But I digress. We get into it. And we're going to start with the big one, the granddaddy of them all, the NFL MVP. Not the Nickelodeon most valuable player, the most valuable player here. We have Patrick Mahomes leading the way, plus 325. Mike, you said it prior that he might be having the best year of his career again, even with less talent around him. Underneath him, we have Jalen Hurts plus 350, tied with Hurts, Joe Burrow plus 350. This is where I started to scratch my head on my notes. On my notes here, I put 12 question marks. How the hell did Brock Purdy get on this list is my question. If anybody over at Vegas Insider sees this, definitely hit me up on Twitter and let me know.
I wonder these are actually Super Bowl MVP odds and not regular season MVP odds. Because right now, I think Mahomes has to be
on that either.
A favorite, not a dog.
They have to be. But at least it gives us a half decent idea because it obviously is a pretty close to a 3 or 4 man race here. Quarterbacks are always taking it. We have Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, Allen. If you have to take one, who are you taking to win the MVP this year?
If it's a regular season award, as we've been told, then it has to be Mahomes. He was terrific from start to finish. Hurts was right there, but he did get banged up late and missed a couple games, which unfortunately kind of tanked his chances. So given how consistent Mahomes was start to finish, he had, 5,000 passing yards, 40 passing touchdowns. You have to give it to Mahomes. No brainer on that one.
Yeah, it makes sense. And Michael Crossan, hit me up on Twitter so we can figure this thing out because these are definitely not the right odds. But the passage underneath is definitely talking about the MVP, so I don't take any blame for this one. But Mike, same question to you, my friend. We have a couple of heavy-duty passers. Who are you taking to take home the MVP this year?
Yeah, I believe the finalists are Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, Allen, and Justin Jefferson. Of those, if Hurts didn't get hurt and he continued to play at the pace he was playing at, I do believe he would win it. But ifs and buts and all that stuff, he did get hurt, missed a couple games. Mahomes was as stellar as ever. It's going to be Mahomes, and I don't think there's much of a debate or really question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. When you play as well as he's played, I mean, he continues to look better. There is a reason that he is, the best quarterback in the league, one of the most talented passers I think we've ever seen play the game. And he's definitely going to be in the MVP conversation for many, many years to come. We're not going to see the end of him for a long, long time. So then we move into the realm of NFL Offensive Player of the Year, which is usually just the best offensive player that is not a quarterback, even though they still include quarterbacks in the odds. So we're looking at JJ minus 800, Tyreek Hill plus 1400, Mahomes 16, Hurts 18, 4,000 for Allen, 5,000 for McCaffrey, 5,000 for Kelsey, 10,000 for Brown, and 10,000 for Barkley. So as we just kind of alluded to, Justin Jefferson is among the finalists to win this MVP, which is why he is so overwhelmingly favored to win Offensive Player of the Year. Is there anywhere else you're going on this list, Mike?
No, because I don't want to lose money for no reason. I mean, it's Justin Jefferson, and it's not even, there's a huge gap between him and second, in my opinion. He has the near record-breaking stats for the season. He made highlight reel plays, everything that you need, like check, all the stuff that you need basically for the offensive, the non-MVP basically offensive award. It's Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, and another interesting call, as much as I'm not averse to losing my money and will put it on the dumb things, one that I'm actually liking here too, I think, is I'm actually going past our employer as well, Mike. PFF actually gave this award during their awards article here, I think this past week. They awarded Offensive Player of the Year to Tyreek Hill for his receiving grade there, for his total offensive grade. I'm definitely right there with you, but I think given the value, all things considered, I might sprinkle a couple dollars there on Tyreek Hill. V, are you riding with Justin Jefferson too? I mean, it's hard not to. He's been amazing, especially when you think about it. He did all these things with Kirko Chains, man. That's, I think, the most impressive feat out of all of this.
Absolutely. I think you have to give it to him just for that catch against Buffalo. He was the key cog in this machine. He's the reason they were so successful. They're the reason they won so many games, won the division, had a home playoff game. Everything goes through him on that offense, so you have to give it to Justin Jefferson.
Absolutely. Dalvin Cook was kind of mid pretty much all season. They were atrocious defensively. They had a negative point differential, and we're still winning all these games. It's because when Kirk can just chuck it down there and say, Justin's down there somewhere, makes the life a lot easier on an offense. So I'm right there with you guys. At minus 800, it's definitely not worth betting, but, I'm sure some people outside of the Minnesota area also took some Justin Jefferson tickets prior at probably a better price. And another pretty much foregone conclusion here. We have Defensive Player of the Year. You're looking at Nick Bosa minus 1,100, Micah Parsons plus 600, Myles Garrett 10,000, Max Crosby 10,000, Chris Jones 10,000, and Matt Judon 10,000. V, where are you falling on this one?
Has to be Nick Bosa, another favorite. It's just monster season, 18 and a half sacks. Literally nobody could stop him this year. There was not an offensive lineman in this game who could slow him down this season. He was unstoppable. Have to give it to him. It was awesome to see him full back and fully healthy this year after having a couple injuries over the last couple seasons. So going with Bosa on this one.
An absolute bully. He was taking tackles lunch money all season long. Mike, where are you falling on this one?
I think this might be the closest award in terms of if there were another name to pop up and things along those lines. And I'm actually going to look at Micah Parsons here. I think that he's had a phenomenal season in his own right. He moved around the entire defense. He was all over the place. They dropped him back into coverage. He made plenty of turnovers. I mean, he was always a focal point. And I think that the notoriety of nearly getting the award last year, coming back and having an even better season once he moved up mostly to be more towards the edge of the defensive line instead of playing off-ball linebacker as much. I like him at that even a little bit of a value that you might think of being second favorite compared to Bosa.
Well, yeah, and like as you put it here, with the odds that we're looking at right here from Vegas Insider, Parsons at plus 600. I mean, that creates an immense value because you're getting as close up the board as you can with still having plus value because most people aren't going to bet Nick Bosa minus 1100. Now, another one that I find very interesting is how far Chris Jones is down this board. Now, obviously, we had this conversation just a little bit ago when we talked about Chris Jones's impact is not so much on the stat sheet as it is in his ability to wreak havoc on double teams and draw in more blocking to free up his guys. And that's actually why another one from PFF, they gave Chris Jones their defensive player of the year, and that is off of a 92 defensive grade, which he's been an excellent pass rusher since he's moved more to the edge. But as you put it, Mike, he gets double teamed a lot. He opens up a lot of things for the rest of those guys on that defensive line. And, Kansas City tends to need to blitz to get some pressure too. So that's another thing. He's not going to have the amazing numbers, so he's not worth, the money to put on him here. But it's an interesting tidbit with how far down the board he is there. But we move on to another award, maybe a little bit closer, but really not by a whole lot here. We have the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year with Garrett Wilson, our guy, Garrett Wilson. Now, I have to give Mike some credit because, Mike, you were actually the one who turned me on to really how dominant Garrett Wilson was prior to this season. You were banging the drum for Garrett Wilson prior in the pre-draft process. I had overlooked him slightly, but when I came back around to him, he was undoubtedly the best wide receiver coming out, and he proved it this year, and he comes into this one at minus 200. Behind him, we have Kenneth Walker plus 450, and miraculously, as we talked about a little bit earlier, Brock Purdy makes his way to this list off of just a handful of starts, plus 700. I'm sure he's going to be heavily bet, and I thank you to the public who does that because you're the reason why I'm able to bet the other side and win money. Underneath him, we have Christian Watson plus 900, and underneath him, Brian Robinson plus 2,200. Now, I know what V's going to say because we have been winning money off of Garrett Wilson all season long. So go ahead, V, get it off your chest. Let them know how good Garrett Wilson is.
He's so good that he's at the top of this list despite having to play with Zach Wilson. What else do you need to say? That just makes him a legend always. I mean, if he got to play with Mike White for 17 games, he would be minus 200,000, not minus 200. That's how good he would have been. So I think Wilson is a good bet for this. Sad to not see Chris Olave on here. Dude was leading the league for a while in yards per catch. He was a beast. He had some, inconsistent quarterback play as well. So would have liked to see him on this list.
Oh gosh, and poor Chris Olave, who is probably going to be stuck on that bad Saints team for a while, considering their bad cap. They're not going to be.
Let Jameis cook.
Let Jameis cook. LASIK Winston is back for 2023. You love to see it. Mike, same question for you, my friend here. Go ahead and heap praise on Garrett Wilson because I know that that's where you're going to fall also.
Yeah, I am surprised as well that Chris Olave isn't even on the top 5 here at all.
It should be Chris Olave instead of Brock Purdy, if we're honest. I mean,
I'd take even Breece Hall over Brock Purdy if we're going to be honest about who played the best in their short period of time on the field. So right. I'd take Kenny Pickett over him even. Like, it's ridiculous to have Brock Purdy on this. But yes, Garrett Wilson, like I said, there was debates between early in the pre-draft process of Drake London, Treylon Burks, who's wide receiver 1 in this class. I mean, once I saw Garrett Wilson's play at Ohio State, I just fell in love with it. I knew his route running ability and his ability after the catch was just stellar. So he's played with Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, Mike White, and sprinkle in a little bit of Chris Streveler I think is his name. So if you can produce 1,000-yard season with that as the passing of your offense, I think you just should be given the award and no questions asked. Praise Garrett Wilson, basically.
Zach Wilson had a 77-yard game, and Garrett Wilson still managed to make it over 1,000 yards. As you said, I think that's the most impressive feat ever. And you know what? Given that, he should probably be lower odds than -200. He should be probably around the -500 range, because that, just give it to him already. Lock it up. It's amazing. So we'll stop gushing about Garrett Wilson. Garrett, the offer still stands. If you ever want to come on the show, I'm happy to have you. I will create time, and we will have the Garrett Wilson show right here on Locked In. Can't wait for it to happen. We move on to NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. And oddly enough, it is another Jet. We have Sauce Gardner -1,200 to lead for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Behind him, Aiden Hutchinson +800. Tariq Woolen, who had a great start to the season, was really the anchor of that Seahawks defense. He's at +1,600. Kayvon Thibodeau +6,600. And up the bottom of the list, Kyle Hamilton +10,000. Now, gents, Mike, where are you seeing this award fall? Obviously, Sauce Gardner, he was an elite corner right off the rip. But, Aiden Hutchinson, he's a hell of a player too. And even Tariq Woolen, he was great. Are we thinking too much of recency bias when we think of maybe why Sauce Gardner is so favored? Or are you all in Sauce Gardner here?
I mean, this is a 3-man race, and then there's a major gap of like every other rookie, not even in the same stratosphere. But Tariq Woolen, he's got the interception numbers, played well at times during the season, but overall, I don't think he deserves the award. It's between Hutchinson and Sauce Gardner. Hutchinson had actually a very strong end to the season. About halfway through the year, the Lions defense as a whole really picked it up, and that's what helped them go on the tear that helped them go from like 1-6 to nearly the playoffs, was that their defense improved from being not literally the worst in the entire league to a middle of the pack type defense.
Didn't their DC get head coaching interviews too?
He has, yeah. Aaron Glenn, yeah.
Yeah.
He has gotten some head coaching interviews, and he was going to, I think, because he was a players type coach, it seems like. A lot of people like him, a lot of players like him. So I thought that as long as he wasn't literally last, that he would get some praise throughout the year. Hutchinson did everything, it seemed. He had at least 3 interceptions. He had a couple forced fumbles or fumble recoveries. He had plenty of sacks. I mean, he did everything. So if you're looking at the stat sheet, you're going with Hutchinson. If you're looking at the play on the field, Sauce Gardner was the best cornerback and best defender that was a rookie. And I think Sauce is gonna win it, especially because he even got AP first team All Pro votes. Like, this guy was praised the entire year for good reason. He is a shutdown corner in the NFL, and didn't take him long to make a name for himself.
In playing a position that is so high in variance at cornerback, and to stay as consistently good as he did all season is why he's up there. And it just makes as much sense. V, what are you making of this group?
Probably agree with Mike. It's probably going to end up going to Sauce Gardner. I would say there probably shouldn't be as big of an odds gap between Gardner and Hutchinson. Hutchinson was very good this season. I think one thing he has going for him is that he didn't have nearly as much talent around him as Mike Gardner did in New York. I mean, the Jets had a pretty stacked defensive unit top to bottom, whereas Lions cupboard is still pretty bare on the defensive side. They have a lot of work to do to build that up. Hutchinson is a very good foundation piece, but plenty of other places on that defense where they got to bring in some more talent, whereas the Jets are closer to a more complete product on that end. So value is definitely there a little bit with Hutchinson, but with awards like these, it's kind of set in stone. If Gardner is the favorite, he's probably going to end up winning it. That's just how these things go.
Yeah, and it makes too much sense. And I completely agree with you. I think Aiden Hutchinson should be a little bit higher on this board here. And I'm sure that at some books you are going to find it much closer, a contest. One of the most impressive things, as you said, Mike, was Aiden Hutchinson's ability to do so many things. There were a number of times, and Aaron Glenn's ability to be creative on defense to cover up his holes. There were times where they're putting out completely odd formations where Aiden Hutchinson lined up in the curl flat or all the way over to the sideline and literally ran in to have the QB just hand him the ball, just throw it right to him. So it is an interesting thing what they've done over there, and Aiden Hutchinson's ability to adapt and play all over the field is going to be an interesting thing to watch. He's a great player. Can't wait to see what he does moving forward. And hopefully they get him some more talent to help around him. So we head into the odds for NFL comeback player of the year. And who even knows what the actual criteria is to, qualify for this award? Some players were just shitty before and now they're playing well. Some are coming back from injury. It's almost like kind of a middle finger if you're like, Geno Smith and you win this award and you were like never hurt. You were just bad like for so many years. So you have Saquon Barkley and Geno Smith tied for best odds, plus 175. Christian McCaffrey down here plus 250. Jared Goff 700 and Derrick Henry plus 8,000. And I mean, your guys' guess is as good as mine. I think I would probably lean towards the top of the board here, McCaffrey or Barkley, because they not only have been, great in their return, they really didn't skip a beat. They've been their best players on each of their teams. McCaffrey's been the best player on 2 teams this season. I don't know how many guys can say that. So when we look at this one, V, is anybody else sticking out at you?
Well, you definitely took the words out of my mouth in terms of Geno Smith and Jared Goff. I mean, what the hell are they coming back from? They were on the field last season.
Such adversity.
Just because you were bad and now you are slightly above average doesn't mean you were coming back from anything. So that's very strange. I think McCaffrey's a good bet here. I mean, he's been awesome. He's been fully back to 100%. He's still playing. His team is very good, and he's a big part of that reason why that a team went out and traded a lot of picks to acquire him, and they've been amazing ever since. I think he's not coming back from just one down season. It's been 2 injury riddle seasons for him. So I think McCaffrey makes a lot of sense for this one.
And me personally, I have to thank both Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey for winning me a couple of fantasy championships this year. Shout out to both of you guys right there. And Mike, same question to you. Anybody else highlighting for you as comeback player of the year here?
Well, I think that Barkley's going to win it because of him going from missing so much time last year. And even when he came back, he didn't even play 50% of the snaps for the Giants at the end of the year. The offense was just in shambles all of last year, and he became a top 5 touch, top 5 touch leader this year. He had the most of his career in a season, his most total yardage and everything else. So I think that they're going to look to him because he also has come back from 2 straight bad injury-riddled seasons. One was for an entire year, then it was for most of the year last year, where it was like missed a handful of games, but then came back and then just wasn't the same player, wasn't used the same, wasn't on the field as much. But I do like the McCaffrey odds better. As in, if you were to take money on this, I think that McCaffrey has all the claim to it. Like, he has been phenomenal this year. He was great as basically the entire offense in Carolina and was mostly the receiving option. And that was it there in Carolina. But then he showed when he got to San Fran and got acclimated to the offense, I can run in between the tackles still. I can still receive the ball. San Fran was last in target rate for running backs before McCaffrey got there. And since McCaffrey got there till the end of the season, they were, I believe, top 5 for any of the quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, doesn't matter, Brock Purdy. So I am very cool with that value of McCaffrey has.
It makes too much sense there. He is the key
Especially if
player
they make a
on that
run in
top.
these playoffs just as a recency bias type thing.
Exactly.
People...
I was just about to say he is the only guy left on this team playing, and he is the key player there. And as our guy Steve Bottom puts it, Zach Wilson actually ended up being the best player on 10 teams this season, whoever the Jets ended up playing. That is a good one. And Steve will be doing his stand-up sometime in the off season. You can hit him up for that. So we move on to one of, I think, the most interesting award of the entire NFL award season, and that is the NFL Coach of the Year. Leading the pack, we have the Eagles, Nick Sirianni, minus 175. We have San Francisco's Kyle Shanahan, plus 275. Jacksonville's Doug Peterson, plus 800. The New York Football Giants, Brian Dable, plus 1,400. The Lions, Dan Campbell, plus 2,000. And the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, plus 4,000. What a group of guys. The first thing that sticks out to me personally is Giants coach Brian Dable being the fourth coach on this league when, depending on who you talk to around NFL circles, he is the runaway favorite to win this thing, given how well he has coached this season with a guy like Daniel Jones, with an absolutely abysmal wide receiving core. I'm interested to see what you guys think. Mike, we'll start with you. Who stands out as the guy you got to target in this group?
I mean, I think there's only 4 coaches that should have a chance to get Coach of the Year, and it should be either Brian Dable, Doug Peterson, Dan Campbell, or Mike Tomlin. One of those 4, and that's it. Nick Sirianni, Philly, is one of the best rosters in the entire NFL. Sorry, but they're where we thought they were going to be. San Fran, Kyle Shanahan, I get that you had to deal with some injuries at quarterback, but you still have arguably a top 5 roster. We're not just because we're looking at the record doesn't mean like, oh yeah, let's just give it to the top coach of the top record team. That's just not how they should be. Kevin O'Connell played, he coached great, but he's basically banking on the fact that they won every game that was a 1-score game, and they had so many of them, which is good, but the team overall had a negative margin of victory or score margin throughout the year. So I think that Brian Dable should be the clear-cut favorite here because of he's done the most with the least, in my opinion. The roster was hardly talented, to say the least. I mean, Doug Peterson might get the notoriety because of coming and taking a team over that just had the number 1 overall pick, taking it to the playoffs, winning a playoff game, and the debacle that was Urban Meyer, if we can still even say his name without like getting in trouble. But
I think YouTube's probably going to demonetize this one now, but that's okay, Mike. we got demonetized a long time ago, so
it doesn't have a star quarterback, had nobody at wide receiver, traded one of his best wide, or at least one of his most talented wide receivers throughout the year, and dealt with a lot of injuries even. They were shuffling along the offensive line throughout the year, and the defense definitely, especially in the secondary, with Adoree Jackson missing time and stuff like that. So I think that it's Brian Dable, and there's a decent gap.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And our guy, Steve, again, he's loving the odds here on Peterson. The first team in NFL history to go from worst in the league to playoff win the following season. You gotta appreciate the odds there. And especially I love seeing both of these guys further down the board. I pin both of them as being my favorites to take it. Like I said, I like Brian Dable as the clear-cut favorite, but I love the odds on Peterson here too. Another one that's interesting is obviously Kyle Shanahan, because as much as like it is like the Nick Sirianni thing is more like, hey, you had a great roster, you didn't shoot your foot, or like you didn't shoot yourself in the foot, essentially. But I think Kyle Shanahan deserves a little bit of notoriety for what they did with 3 different quarterbacks. Now, is it enough to outweigh what Doug Peterson has done over there in Jacksonville or what Brian Daboll did there in New York? I don't think so. What do you see with this guy or with this group of guys?
I'm going with Kyle Shanahan. I think you just said it. It's not just 3 quarterbacks, but it's who those quarterbacks were. I mean, we made fun of the Jets situation a little while ago. This one's isn't much better. If you put these guys on any other team, it would kind of be a joke and a laughing stock. You have Trey Lance, Jimmy G, Brock Purdy. He won with all 3 of them, and not only did they win, they were blowing teams out. I think as the years go on, it's becoming less and less deniable that he is the greatest offensive mind we've seen in the NFL ever. This dude is a legend. One of us could be back there under center, and he would find a way for us to throw for a touchdown pass. That's how good this guy is. Yes, I understand the talent around on that team is incredible, but I think there's a ton of teams that would not be able to figure out how to use these pieces as well as he can. I think if you put Deebo Samuel on one of these other teams with a lesser coaching staff, he would be a shell of what he is currently at San Fran. They will not be able to figure out the best way to use him, where to put him on the field, whether it's in the backfield or as a receiver. Shanahan knows what to do. He knows how to do it with all of these guys. I think he's phenomenal. Brock Purdy, I mean, I don't know. You're winning all these games with Brock Purdy and blowing teams out with him under center. That's amazing. We haven't seen that before. There's a reason we haven't seen a rookie quarterback win the Super Bowl. It's because they're not very good and the coaches aren't geniuses who are able to overcome that. Shanahan is on the doorstep of figuring that out.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what he did with McCaffrey, getting him in there. You know, a lot of us sold on McCaffrey as, you know, not being this elite guy, not being worth the money in Carolina. And now he looks like a deal in San Francisco, as we kind of alluded to earlier. I like it too, especially, you know, a tear comes to my eye because the Shanahan family is obviously very big here in Denver. And I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. I said I wasn't gonna cry. But Kyle Shanahan, amazing coach. He definitely deserves it. And he could have been here in Denver, and now he's, you know, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. So that actually does it for us tonight, guys. It was a great show. We broke down a lot of stuff. We got everything we wanted to hit. And, oh, wait, we have one more thing from Steve. Let's see what Steve has to say. Steve, my only knock on the Niners is they are far and away the easiest schedule in the league, least total wins of all opponents. And, Steve, I definitely highlighted that earlier. Only 2 road starts for Purdy. He's 1-1 against the spread on those. So that makes this a very interesting game as his furthest traveling game this season. This will go a lot of way. And you're right. It's not their fault. The division sucked. It's kind of been a weird season. Usually the NFC West is one of the stronger ones. The NFC East is weak. They switched around. But yeah, it definitely deflated their numbers. And I know that, Steve, that's another one we highlighted a lot in the Discord. For anybody who does not know, we chop it up in our Discord every single day. You can get in there by getting into our Patreon. That gets you access. You could get the MVP tier, and that's how you get access to all the sports betting content that we do. It gets all of our picks. You can go in there, yell at us, talk to Mike, ask him all the questions that you need, 4 months before your fantasy draft even kicks off, and he will have the answers for you. But yeah, that wraps us up, boys. The conference championship preview show. We are not back next week. We will be back in 2 weeks for the last show of the season, the Super Bowl show. Like I said, we are going to blow that one out. I am going to beg, borrow, and steal for every single IN personality I can get my hands on. We're going to have the whole IN cinematic universe here. It's going to be a blast. Check out everything the team over at IN is doing at importantnonsense.com. V and I have a ton of betting stuff coming out all the way up to the Super Bowl. We're going to have some awesome pieces that come out for that as well. V's got a player props piece coming out for this weekend. You can check some of my work out over at profootballfocus.com as well. And yeah, I think, one last thing, shop.importantnonsense.com, promo code LOCK to get all of your IN merch. And that does it for us tonight. V, do you have any parting words for the people at home?
Enjoy the weekend. It's going to be awesome. For the best teams in the league going at it. Should be awesome. We're going to have a great Super Bowl matchup regardless of who wins this weekend. So I can't wait. Looking forward to it.
We want the Kelsey Bowl, baby. Anyway, but Mike, do you have any words for the people at home? Any parting words for the people at home, rather?
Let's just hope that this week's games are a little bit more entertaining than last week, and looking forward to this Super Bowl. Let's get the week going.
Yeah, it goes in waves. We had that great wild card round and then a lackluster divisional round. We're going to have
put a parlay out there for both games to go to overtime.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're going to be 80-plus point games, both go into overtime and both end on a last-second 1-point field goal. And I can't wait to see it happen. But until next time, guys, good night and good luck.